On such an important day of Women's International Day, I have to confess that I have 4 pages that my original idea was to follow, as English is my second language, but I will take the risk of not following my pages and try to speak in a very open and ask you to use imagination if I move to a wrong way in language or in my thoughts. I decided to start telling you a story of how ANIS, the organization that I'm a volunteer, and myself got involved in the Zika virus epidemic. So it's a short story. In January of this year, I was invited by Pan American Health Organization to be a member of a group of specialists, of experts, to draft a national, a regional policy on Zika virus epidemic and what we called at that moment the microcephaly and the risk of microcephaly in the future children. So participating in this group gave me a different picture of what was going on from inside in Brazil. We are now facing this sensitive political and economic moment, and we developed this internal perspective of not trusting in the numbers of the epidemic and not trusting of really what was going on in the center of the Zika zone epidemic in the northeastern of the country. So after being totally immersed in the international group of experts, we had a clear idea that something was going really wrong in Brazil. And we decided to admit that we have an epidemic. And the epidemic was not only related to the Zika and the mosquito, but the epidemic related to women's reproductive rights and the risk of the neurological birth defects in the future children. So we were informed that WHO would announce the emergency global situation on February 1st. At the same day, we decided to announce that we were prepared to move to the Supreme Court to guarantee women's and children's rights as a consequence of the epidemic. I have to confess you, at that moment, we didn't have anything to offer, only our ideas, only our organization, and a past experience related to a former case to the Brazilian Supreme Court that I'm open to discuss with you the kind of experience that we have doing this strategic litigation at the Brazilian Supreme Court. So I went to BBC Night Show for the first time, my live experience doing an interview, and we announced that we are now preparing to make a demand to the Brazilian Supreme Court. Legally speaking, we cannot move as a civil society organization. It's straightforward from society to the Supreme Court. We need a partner which is recognized by the Supreme Court as a legitimate partner. 10 years ago, we worked with a health trade union of 1 million members. Of course, 1 week later of our announcement, I knocked at their door saying, I'm back 10 years later, and now we have an epidemic. We need more data. We need to know exactly what is going on to make a demand on this taboo topic that is abortion in Brazil. But at the same time, well, sure, I'm happy to clarify you exactly what we are now prepared to make the demand. But it's not only a case on abortion. To talk about social justice, reproductive rights, it's not only to talk about abortion. Abortion is really important. But also how to take care of babies. If we do recognize that we live in a democracy, we do believe that women have the right to choose, to keep the pregnancy or to terminate the pregnancy. So we knock at their doors And they said, yes, let's start our negotiation. But differently from 10 years ago, we are now facing an emergency. At the beginning of February, the numbers were around 3,000 notified cases and 40 confirmed cases for Zika virus, and around 400 for cases that we know that we have neurological birth defects, but we could not find Zika virus and any kind of biomedical test that we have. We now have around 6,000 cases, 600 confirmed for neurological birth defects, and 82 found Zika virus in babies. But only to give you an idea, and I know that I'm recording, 2 weeks ago, I went to Pernambuco, and Recife, the capital of the state. I saw a huge paper on the wall, and it said, only in Recife, we have 98, almost 100 cases confirmed for Zika virus. So I asked the secretary, say, how it comes? So only in Recife we have 100 cases. How do we have lesser than 100 for national numbers? And he told me our numbers are not included in the national numbers. So basically what we have is that this is an optimistic picture of the size of the epidemic in Brazil. So we decided to move our group of work from Brasilia, from our well-to-do neighborhood, where we don't know even a case of baby born with neurological birth defects. And we decided to live in Campina Grande, a small city from Sertão da Paraíba. This place is one of the key of the Zika zone in Brazil. And from there, that I'm happy to tell you stories of women that I've met in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Concrete, everyday women that are facing poverty, facing a weak social state, social protection state, and not facing the epidemic in a way that they have to understand that the mosquito that was there for decades as a result of a persistent negligence of the Brazilian state is now a kind of talent to their lives and the lives of their future children. So we are now prepared to make the demand. And we have, and I'm totally open to share it in public, we basically have 3 strategies. The first one, and it's really good news. Next week we had a meeting of the National Association of the Public Defenders. And they are a legitimized organization to make a petition to the Brazilian Supreme Court. Sinara is the lawyer of Diniz, and she will be the lawyer of the case. And she was with me at the plenary section of the public defenders. And they said, yes, we'll move with you to the Brazilian Supreme Court. For us, it was really a huge and important day, because the demand that we are planning to make, we need them, because the near future of these women is to litigate education, accessibility, social protection, everything related to basic needs to survive. So we need the public defenders to be with us since the beginning. But we still have the second organization. And Sinara and I, we will fly to the south of the country tomorrow to have a second meeting with a second organization. And our plans are maybe to split the case, as we have so many things to ask, so many rights violated by the epidemic, that maybe we can consider 2 different cases. But always, we have been expecting an individual case, an everyday woman, to call us to have a concrete case with a face to make the demand to the Brazilian Supreme Court. So we have these three possibilities. But I can tell you that we are now ready to move to the final steps of the case. So basically, what do we want to demand? We named the demand as a family planning and protection to motherhood and childhood. Of course, you can ask me, and why not ask sexual and reproductive rights? Because family planning is a constitutional right in Brazil. So we are speaking constitutional language, Brazilian constitutional language. And we have two groups of demands. The first one is access to information, which means access to the best diagnosis that is available in the public health system. It can be clinical diagnosis. And if we have by chance PCR, the blood test, that's fine. But if we don't have, the clinical diagnosis is enough to inform women that they were infected by Zika virus. If the woman, if she's infected by Zika virus, we would like to ask to give her the right to interrupt the pregnancy. We are not talking about forcing any women to take any decision. And we are not associating the epidemic and the demand to any fetal diagnosis. We are associating with the risk of being pregnant while the epidemic is out there. These women are suffering such a kind of psychological torture that we consider that we have a strong constitutional violation going on. And the second demand, and it's not an easy demand considering the economical climate of Brazil, is to extend the social protection and a specific cash benefit, a cash transfer benefit to all children infected by the Zika virus and with the diagnosis of the neurological birth defects. As I said at the beginning, microcephaly is only one of the symptoms of the outcomes of the epidemic. The doctors, the scientists, have been naming Zika virus syndrome. The situation is much more severe than only, if you can say in that way, there is only one symptom that is microcephaly. And so this is our, I would say that is the backstage of the case, the backstage of who we were, and the moment that we are now moving to do this litigation at the Brazilian Supreme Court. Before moving to your questions, I really would like to thank you, Ambassador, for the invitation for today and for such an important day of Women's International Day to have this conversation with you.
Brazilian society, just to